Hey, welcome back. All right, so back into action this week. Let's see what we got going on. First, I'm going to open switches to student preview so you guys see. I see what you see what I see. First note is week 1 assignments are all due end of the day today, midnight. So make sure you get them in. Make sure you do your peer reviews. If you don't do the peer review, you lose an entire grade. So if you did A work, it's going to be a B. Just kind of note that. And if it's late and you don't do a peer review, the highest grade you're going to get is a C. So kind of keep that in mind as you work through things. The other one, which I highly suggest to everybody use, is the midweek review. Just like you do the assignment, you know, don't do it today because it's a little late. It's due today. But if you do your assignment and you post it to midweek review, I'll be like, oh, make this change or make this change to make it perfect. And then you just make these little changes and you learn how to do perfect design instead of just sending it in and then finding out. And I got to write you a note in the assignment one. And if you don't get to it and then you get a bad grade, and you're like, I didn't know I got a bad grade. But, you know, work with me. These midweek reviews are amazing way to make sure you get a perfect grade every time. I check them. Actually, I do often check them on weekends as well. It's a guarantee Monday through Friday. I check them at least once. I generally check them on the weekends as well. Not always. Like this Sunday, I didn't get to it because we had too many family things going on, but I do check. So it's a great way to make sure you're getting a perfect grade every time. And it's so simple and it's so easy. So don't forget when assignments are due. Make sure you do the peer reviews and use the midweek review to get better grades. It's so cut and dry. Easy, easy. All right. Today, form. Let's get into it. We have talked about a point. Oh, that's not dark enough. A point. And then as the book says, you know, I talked about it. If we go from point to point and we draw a line in between, we have a line. You know, I said connect the 2 points. Another one the book said is if you just keep doing points and points and points and point and point, and you end up with a line eventually. But I like my analogy where connecting 2 points is a line. And then we talked. If I have line and a line and a line, and I take that final line and I close it, I end up with a shape. So we went from a point to a line. And with the lines, as we talked and we know from our assignments, can be very expressive. You know, we can have a lot of fun with that. Shapes are shapes, but shapes, once we start adding, I'll do this. Once we start building on shapes, if I do this and add a triangle on top and add a rectangle in the middle and 2 squares, and then I add a rectangle to the side of it with a circle, I just drew shapes. But what does that look like to you? It starts to become not just, you know, you wouldn't say like, when I say like, look at that, what is that? You wouldn't say, well, I see a triangle, 2 squares, 2 rectangles, 3 rectangles and a circle. You'd be like, oh, it's a house and a tree. And that's how we, you know, form our ideas of what imagery is. It's based on shapes. We start to take that apart. And this is, you know, going into its simplest forms here. Now I can take that house that I had that shape, and I'm going to do this. And I take those shapes and I start to create form. It doesn't take much to kind of give that illusion of form. But it just brings that to the next level. You know, we see this now as a 3D image simply by adding in. And what we're basically adding in is these are just shapes, but we're going into more advanced shapes, into like that side shape is I believe it's a parallelogram, where these 2 are parallel and these 2 are parallel, but they're not parallel with each other. So that shape put onto this rectangle gives the illusion of form. it's pretty cool the way that we can come across, that develops from just simple starting with the baseline a dot. So let's check out form. Zoom in. So we can read it. All right. So in that little explanation there, that's basically the definition. A form refers to the three-dimensional structure of an object. It includes a length, a width, and depth. So when we go back and we talk about, if I talk about layouts that we're going to talk about in a couple weeks, it's length and width, or height is another one. Length, width, and height we also talk about. So some of these are interjecting, how can you say each one? And sometimes it changes. So when we say like a piece of paper is 8.5 by 11, that's a standard piece of paper. That's the width and the height is what that equals. There's no depth to it though. That third dimension is missing. So now we add depth to it. You could get really fancy with me and take a micrometer and be like, well, the piece of paper is now actually point blah, blah, blah in depth as well. So it is 3D in actuality. But when we're talking, it's this magic depth that changes it from a flat object in definition to a three-dimensional form. Characteristics, forms can be geometric or organic. I mean, it's just like what we see as the world, like we see in 3D. It's almost, when we design now, there is a design trend. I don't know, it's not really a trend. It's called flat design, which everything is just flat shapes. It's very, very hip right now. It's very cool to do. But it's very funny that we are now defining the opposite when we do design. That like, oh, it's a flat shape. What's called flat design. It's not 3D anymore. It's flat. So it's always kind of a fun thing to reference. While shape is two-dimensional, it has a height and width. I just went over this. Form adds a third dimension. Great. Role in composition. It adds realism. It adds something, I guess the great word here is something almost tangible that you want to reach out and grab it, or it's familiar. That's a great way to think about that, is if you add in that three-dimensional form, it is a little bit more familiar to us in our 3D world that we live in and we walk in, and we sense it. It's also this fun in illusion, which is a lot of fun to deal with. Like we're making something look like something that you could touch, grab, or feel. It's pretty cool the way we can change the way people look at your design by using illusion. This goes down the line with normal stuff. Spatial relationship, forms help establish spatial relationship between objects. It's the same thing with shapes. It's almost the same thing as lines. We are using, as we talk about, these are elements in design. So they kind of all have the same, spatial relationship idea, because they're the elements. They're the things we put in a design to create the full design. Expressive potential, texture, and materiality. We will be talking more about texture, which is one of the elements as well, which adds to this whole idea of form. But it's just, I kind of like that term, expressive potential, is it does open up new doors in the way people view the design and are amazed by the design. Again, like anything else, this emotion and mood, this can come down to all of the elements somehow can create that. We did that in the first project with lines. How do you make emotions out of lines? Well, it's doable. It's not impossible to do that. You've done it, and you did it 6 different emotions. Like, who would have thought that you can create emotion from that? And now you can create emotion from form as well. It depends on that form. Like, what are we drawing? Oh, we could do this. Little teardrop. Oh, down, falling down. That little form may, is it rain? Or is it a tear? Like, there's emotion behind a form. If I could shade it, I'd shade it a little bit better, but we know what we're using here. How do we get that appeal? It's shading, shadows, highlights are used to help push the idea of form, though not always needed. And you'll learn that in the assignment. You're going to create form within a box, but only using 3 colors. And I shouldn't even say 3 colors. You will be using black, white, and 50% gray. That's it. That's all you need to trick the eye into thinking form is there. But it is a little bit dealing with form and somewhat the angle of line or the angle of your shape. How your shape is set up changes how people see something. We'll get to that in the assignment, but what I'm talking about is, showed it before, or I can show it. I can show it here. Is like just this simple, like just that shape can make people think that this is further away than this. Or even if I do that, some sort of weird reference, that totally changes it. If it's tall here and short there, well, this must be further away. Well, it's not. It's in the same line. I just tricked you by having this shape below it. So there's a lot of fun that can be had with tricking people or showing them different stuff. Here we'll go through a bunch of awesome examples, all varying differences too. So we have this first one, Warcross, definitely built in a 3D program. Some of this, doing this, you would need to step outside. If you're very curious about how to work with this, there are free 3D programs out there. It's not fully taught here at MATC because it would be a whole another class that we'd have to add on, but it can be done. I know how to do 3D work because of my previous art directing job, and we would build environments and do stuff like that. It's doable. You can do simplified versions within our programs that we use with Illustrator and some Photoshop work. It is doable. It takes some time, but it's one of those, like, you need to know you want to do it to learn to use it, but first you should learn to use the basics, like learn how to use line correctly before you start jumping into like crazy 3D form instead. So, but this is an awesome, beautiful example of what you can do now with computers and the rendering software to make it look glossy or see-through. Like this upper part is very see-through letters, and then here it's war. And as you can see, this gridding they just kept repeating it and then repeating it and overlapping to create that cube. And then they, have the color differences and the perfect, and this is rendered. It's called rendering when we do that. So pretty rad, pretty cool looking. The basics. I can't remember. This movie came out in the 90s, I think. But this is fisheye lens. So this effect, a drop or a fisheye lens, used to have a special camera to get this effect. Now you can just do it in Photoshop in like 5 seconds. You just grab your image and you hit circle. I think it is maybe even called fisheye lens, or there's a circle, orb, sphere thing. I don't ever do it. That's why I don't know the name of it. But that's how you get that effect. The face is coming closer to you. It looks like it's a sphere. It looks like it's what do you call those? A crystal ball. super down and dirty, but at the time this was hard to do. You needed a special lens, or it wasn't as easy to do within the computer systems. You are learning design in like this wonderful age of, especially with the introduction of AI with all our tools, is just being able to say like, this is what I have in my brain. Is there a way that I can get it visually closer, or see, like, you know, I can describe it and it can try to generate what I'm looking for. So it's a great new idea that like you can even now probably push this if I were to add an image and then try to use AI to help me get what I want, what's in my brain, onto the paper, and not just use AI for just like doing the work for me. But this is old school, doing this fisheye lens thing. I actually had a camera with a fisheye lens for a while. It was kind of fun. It wasn't this extreme. I wish it was. We talk about like, you know, sensations, or you know, creating emotion. Emotion and texture and materiality is what this one is for the Chupa Cups suckers. You know, like this looks like a sucker, but it's the letter formation, and so you know exactly what it is. You may actually, if you're a fan of these, you may actually even know like, oh, that's this flavor, you know, because of the coloration of it. So, you know, using that form, because it is one product, it's a sucker. And why go beyond that? Like, people recognize it, they know the name immediately, and so why not use that name and that product, which is the only product, and have that be the way that you get the message out to the people. It's so relatable if you know it. It's like, and that's what you want in design. Relatable means comfortable, and you know it, and then you kind of remember it. You'll learn this later on in your career here, is emotion and mood. If you can create emotion within your design, people will remember it. That's how it works. There's a whole like psychological bend behind graphic design in getting people to feel emotion when they see your ad, and because they had an emotional you had an emotional impact on them, they are far more likely to remember it. If it just is something and they're like, looks cool doesn't you don't remember it. But if you're like, wow, oh yeah, that totally reminds me of this, and it can't, you know, I feel good about it because I remember growing up and always getting these at the store, and then you remember this. And then so next time you go to the store and you see the product, you'll feel like, oh yeah, I remember that ad, I'm going to grab a couple for the, you know, sake of remembering that emotional bond. And there you go, you just bought some, because there is an emotional bond created here to when you're at the store. I really like this Tyco design because it almost implies form. Like, there's not shading per se. There is some mild shading. There's some lines in here that are very hard to see, that have a very light gradient. But for the most part, it's shapes and lines. You know, if you were to take this apart and this, it's shapes and lines that create the form. Just this part right here. You know, it's like, this is a shape. Here's a shape, a tiny one in there. And then we have another shape, which this is the shadow. And then we have a shape just coming out there. And then the inclusion of some lines. But it's all really just, again, broken down. Like, it's that house that I drew. It's just a bunch of shapes put together. But the way the shapes have a curve, or they, you know, jut out, helps us feel like, oh, that is something. And if I darken up one part, we think, oh, that's shaded. Well, it's just black compared to white. What is it really? You know, like, again, we're tricking people into seeing something that's not really necessarily there. That's why I love this one. It's because it's like flat design, but it's beautifully 3D and really impactful. Reminds me of those old cruise pictures. And then here, this final one in the middle of the screen. So if you look at the red, it's like two colors of red, basically. It's regular red and dark red. And I'm saying basically, we can find it. But just the way that they are used with each other gives a sense of design, gives a sense of that 3D design. These squares, just with that little lip, you could say they're diamonds. You know, like if I drew that separately and took it off, you'd be just like, oh, it's just a diamond shape. You know, it's nothing. If I had a bunch of those, you wouldn't think that they were 3D unless I added that little edge on them. Here, standing up this, you know, it looks like it's standing up, but it's just how we drew it. It's parallel lines, but we get this idea that this is standing up. It's like a wall. So kind of like, it's almost easy, but it's so fun, and it adds a whole new dimension to the design. So it's pretty rad what you can do with form, and it can start, you know, simple. Doesn't have to be this. This doesn't need to be form. It can be simple. It can be simple and easy to get across. So that is form. Now, of course, I'm going to open up Switch Systems here. All right. So research. Again, this is for the next 8 weeks. You'll be doing this. Book cover, movie poster, album cover. I want ones with form, do a nice design, practice, perfection. Centering, perfect, you know, alignment. Are they aligned at the top? Are they aligned in the middle? Are they aligned at the bottom? Use, I've mentioned this to a couple of people, title case, which is capital B, capital C. Like, don't just capitalize B and then write cover as all lowercase. So double check all that. I'm double checking all that. You have to get it right. The more you get it right now, the more you'll remember it and just become a natural thing to do from here on out. I write don't squish or squash the images. That pertains to type 2, to text. I've seen a couple where the text is squished. You never do that. You always just do it from the corner and hold down shift. All right, if you want to resize the text, never just squash it. And in fact, let's just do that because I'm talking about it. I'll show you what I mean. I don't even know if I can do it. Is not. So if I, you know, have that and I'm like, oh, I want it over here and I want it smaller, I don't even think I can. Oh, this won't even squish. All right. Well, make sure you're not squishing it. If you're using a program where you can adjust the font, don't. Like, I can't even do it in this. So I don't, somebody is using a different program, which is fine. But make sure you don't squish the font. Like, squished is just, we shouldn't do it. And in Google Slides, you can't even do it. Well, good to know. Good to know. All right, so don't squish the text either. Make sure you do your peer reviews. Make sure you jump on to that midweek review to double check your work if you're unsure about something. All right, the form project. Again, we're going to download the form project, download the file. Open up here, opens up, double click on it. It opens up in Illustrator, and here we are. Here are my examples. Only using black, white, and 50% gray. So let's talk about that a little bit. And I'm only using shapes. There's two things I want to talk about. Okay, first one. What about, how do I do it? Well, if I draw a square, all right, that's a white square with a black outline. First thing, no outlines. I want solid shapes just like this. See how there's not a single outline on anything? I don't want any outlines. It's a weird thing. It's not needed. We don't need to do it. So right there is what I do is I see the stroke. I can just zero that out. There, zero stroke, or you go to the color and you hit that red line. There's no stroke on that. So then to fill, there's black. White is the background, right? You don't need that. And I'm going to create another square. And if I go to fill, one of these, if you hover over it, will be 50%. My hover doesn't always work because I have these giant, so it's probably 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. That doesn't seem right. Let's check it. That's 30. So that's 50. That's 60. I was right. So that's 50% gray. So it's over there. So when you think about what you're going to do, and some of this is you can use the pen tool, and that's all I did. So for this, if I had a square and I want to make it, look like it's doing something else, one, you can pull stuff off. Always pull stuff off the artboard. Then you use the pen tool to like draw the other parts. And now something you can do here, if you didn't know about it. So this actually kind of looks cool. I like that. I can send this to back. So if I go to Object, Arrange, and hit Send to Back, well, it goes back behind the white too. Arrange, bring the front. I'm going to bring the black to front. You can move your objects around, thinking like they're pieces of glass. So this piece of glass is on top of this piece of glass. So this is blocking that. And then by doing that, I've created this. So you can play around. You might end up playing around with not just shape, but with the pen tool to create odd shapes. Now you can start with the shape. So that's that. I'm going to change it to 50% gray. Now, if I take this direct selection tool and I only click on one corner, but I hold down Shift, I can bring those together. It's another great idea to start practicing. And there we go. Now we start getting that road to nowhere. Let me make that even smaller. You know what I mean? So there, and that's how you manipulate the shapes. Practice. So part of this is if you're not an illustrator, there's simple designs. You don't need to do much, but practice. Your Illustrator is the #1 used program in graphic design. So start to use it. And I'm asking you, we're starting out real basic. We're doing lines and shapes, and you did a shape project for this week. And here you're going to, manipulate the shapes and play around. So this arrow moves everything. This arrow moves parts of things. And if you're having trouble, just click off of it. And that's the problem. Like if you have it fully selected and then you try to move something, it will move everything. Just kind of click off and then click on the part you want to move. All right. And so that's what I want. So 3 compositions that help us show form within this square format, only using black, white, and 50% gray, no gradients, no blending, and no outlines. Just solid, 3 solid, quote unquote, colors. There you go. So that's the project. And finally, design practice. I'm going to start my attempt. I would like to thank the student who battled me, and because I had missed in last week, part 2, it said Illustrator, not InDesign, and that was 100% my fault. So thank you for calling that out. If you ever see a mistake of mine, call it out. Happy to hear. You write so many of these assignments, and sometimes a word skips by and you just miss it. All right, Milton Glaser. Here's the zip. If you're on a PC, right-click, extract all, go to the new folder. Mac, you can double-click on it. Now there's gonna be something different. All right, all the links are there. Links are the images that go along with the file. So I'm going to double click on Milton Glaser. All right. Now, if I zoom out, some stuff isn't there. But if I go to layers and I look examples, there's nothing in my little examples. Dun, dun, dun. That means I have to place them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I'm on the examples layer. I'm going to go to File, Place. I'm going to go to my Milton Glaser folder, my links, and open up example 1, 2, and 3. I just held down the Shift button. Again, if I haven't talked about this, you design with one hand on your mouse, one hand over the keyboard, because you should always be using the keyboard to make the design process faster. So I didn't have to do anything weird. My hand's always over the keyboard, and my hand, it's like playing the piano. My hand knows where to go. Just hold that Shift button, hit that. I'm going to hit Place. And then see that it says 1/3. That means there's 3 images holding on. And I'm going to click 3 times. 1, 2, and 3. Now these are all far too big, and I need to make them smaller. So the first thing I like to do is I'm going to click and drag and get all 3 grabbed. I guess it's the best way to say it. And then for me, underneath the rotate tool is a scale tool, or you can hit the letter S. I'm going to make sure that's up, and I'm going to double click on that. I'm going to make sure I'm uniform in scale, and then I'm just going to type in 50. I just want them smaller, so they're not all over the place. And now I can move them where I want and start to place them where they need to go. So this Madman goes at the bottom. So I can line up this at the bottom, and it fits right in there. And I'm going to pull from the corner. But I'm not going to just do this and pull it and be like, that fits. Absolutely not. I have the ability to change this, which is wrong. So we always hold down Shift. You must hold down the Shift button to constrain your image. The way I like to talk about this is that's a piece of artwork that somebody spent time on. You shouldn't ruin it and distort it. It's not how it is. How would you feel if on the social medias that you're on, somebody took a picture of you? Hold on, I'm going to do it with this. And they're like, this awesome photo. And they're like, oh, but it's going on Instagram. So I'll just make it a square. And I'll post that. That's awesome. You'd be like, what did you do to my picture? Why do I look like crud? I don't have a big fat head. And they'll be like, oh, no, I just made it fit. It's not a big deal. No, it is a big deal. We never alter images or other people's artwork when we do design work. We always keep it constrained. It's a big one. Do not squish or squash images in the design. So this next one, I'm going to make it small. I'm going to drag it back up here, and I'm just going to look for this alignment, right? And I can kind of see here, and I can kind of see there, and I'm going to get it as close as I can. Bring that up, and now it's behind. So I'm going to take, it's selected, I'm going to go to Object, Arrange, bring to front. There we go. And then this wine piece should be the exact same width as the I Heart New York. So it's easy to do. I'm going to go from the corner. I'm going to hold down Shift. Here, I'm just going to go up and grab it again. I'm going to hold down Shift and get it. See that? Boom. They both lit up. Those are the same size, and I can bring it down. Get the click in nicely. And now I have those images placed in perfectly. And then the other part, you just do like you did last week. Get them perfectly in there. There we go. Turn off that back copy, save as a PDF, and upload the assignment. And there you go. It's just practice using Illustrator, learning the tools, placing images. It's what you're going to be doing every day. It's what I do every day. So there you go. That is that. Oh, and then finally, let's do one last thing here. The book. I don't know why everybody's scared of the book. Be smart. You guys are smart. You have the internet. You've grown up with the internet at your fingertips, right? Let's open this up. If I just, like, the name of the book is this, right? Graphic Design, the New Basics. If I'm real smart and you're like, what if I type that into the internet, but I type in PDF afterwards? What happens? But instead of just stopping here, I like dig in deep, and I go somewhere and I'm like, what is this? What happens when I click on this? It says PDF. And I'm like, oh snap. Wait, this is the book? Oh, this is the book. Oh, this is the entire book on the internet. And with one click, I can download it. Oh, download. Yeah, save it to my desktop. Now I have the book in a PDF form. That's the book. When you need something, be smart. Look around. A lot of stuff's out there if you look for it. So all those people are afraid, like, oh, I don't have the book. Look around. Be a smart student. So that's it on form. Is there any questions, comments, or concerns? All right. Thursday, we get into color. All right. You know what to do. You can start on your assignments. The assignments are due at the end of the day today from last week. Feel free, use that midweek review to check your work, to make sure you're doing great. And I am around. You can reach out to me at any time you want if you have questions, comments, or concerns. All right. Talk to you again on Thursday. Bye.